Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome DeRoy and Julianne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome, everyone, to Leadership Story Talks Live. Another iteration of this. Very excited for you all to witness and experience the wonderful storytellers that we've got lined up for you today. I'm Jerome DeRoy, CEO of Narrative and the co-host of Leadership Story Talks, the podcast. I'm joined here by my co-host, Julianne Ryan. So glad you're here with us.
Yes, thank you.
Whether you're all joining live or you're watching this later, to spend some time exploring the power of story and leadership and human connection, we really appreciate you being here.
We do. These conversations have quickly become one of our favorite ways to bring people together. Every other month, we invited a few storytellers to share moments from their lives that shaped how they lead, connect, and make meaning in their work. And each time we reminded how powerful it is to simply pause, listen, and reflect together.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I want to say before we get started with the storytellers, and that is to do a little bit of a framing for everyone of this event. It's a little bit unusual the way we're going to do things. It's not your typical performance stage where the spotlight's on the storyteller and then everybody else will disappear. You're actually going to see three storytellers plus me and Julianne on your screen. And that is intentional because we believe that everything actually begins with listening. And so the way everyone is listening, and I know I can't see you all, I can only see Julianne at the moment, but I can still feel you're listening and I can see that there are attendees, which is great. Thanks for being here. But your listening is actually going to shape how we speak today and how we tell these stories. So it's important for our storytellers to feel that listening support as well and to actually be able to see their fellow storytellers as well as me and Julianne. So it's not meant to feel like a performance where someone speaks and everyone sits quietly in the dark. Instead, we kind of think of this as a shared space where storytellers and listeners are in conversation with each other.
And that's why you'll see all of us together on screen throughout the session. Our storytellers will see who's listening, and our audience can feel like they're part of the room. Whether you're joining us from your home or office, or sometimes they're both the same thing, your presence will matter and your attention matters.
Yeah. So what we're going to invite you to do now is just take a moment to set aside any distractions, close the extra browser tabs, perhaps silence notifications, and just give yourself permission to be fully present for the next 45 minutes, right? This isn't your typical webinar where you might be doing 5 things at the same time while something is going on. And again, we can't see you, but you can see us, and maybe it's habitual for you to sort of do other things while you're listening to something. But here we really want to call your attention to how significant it is for you to bring your listening to this event. So we thank you for doing that, and yeah, good time to set aside some distractions that might be going on right now. And Julianne, you're going to tell us a little bit about how.
Okay, I will. This is how our time together will unfold. Each storyteller will share a 6-minute personal story, a moment that shaped how they led, formed connections, or meaning in their work and lives.
Nice. So after each story, what we're going to do is we're going to share a few reflections, and then we're going to invite our storytellers to respond to each other as well. If you've joined us live, I can see that there are some attendees right now. So that's when you can feel free to share some thoughts, reflections, or even questions that you might have in the chat. But I would ask you that you only comment after the person has finished telling their story so that they don't get distracted during their story by, if the chat box suddenly blows up. I know it's tempting because you're going to hear some fantastic stories today. So you might be 2 minutes in and be like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I would ask you to just refrain from that and keep it in check, and then flood us in the chat with some positive comments and reflections and any questions you might have. So we're going to be keeping an eye on your comments as we go.
And then we'll wrap up at 12:45 Eastern, hopefully leaving you with a few stories and maybe some insights that will stay with you long after today.
All right, beautiful. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call all of our storytellers onto the virtual stage one by one, and then once we've done that, I will introduce our first storyteller. All right, welcome Derek, welcome Gina, welcome LaNysha. Right, beautiful, you're all here, it's all working. Minor miracle, I love it. All right, so we're gonna go right into our first storyteller. That's gonna be Gina Leow. I'm gonna put the spotlight on you if you don't mind, Gina. Gina is a people and culture leader who helps organizations build values-driven strategies that spark engagement, improve collaboration, and create lasting impact. She's also the co-author, along with Cecilia Loving, of the book Connecting Through Circles, which explores how dialogue and shared storytelling can strengthen communities and workplaces. Gina, we're so glad you're here with us today. Welcome.
I'm so glad too. Thank you so much.
All right, wonderful. Just a quick note, personal note in terms of how delighted I am that you're here, Gina. Gina and I have known each other a while. We were just reminiscing about that. And I had the extreme privilege of working with you on a few projects, and it's always been just such a pleasure with various organizations, but you always bring the same level of professionalism and presence. And I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about you is the way that you listen. You're just an outstanding listener. And I'm just so thrilled that I get a chance to actually listen to you telling us a story today. So whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. I will keep time on my end. I don't know if it's helpful to you, Gina, but do you want me to give you any sign that we're getting close to 6 minutes or not?
I don't think I need a prompt.
Okay, great. So anytime.
Great. Thank you, Jerome. Really appreciate your kind introduction, and so glad to be here amongst all of us wonderful storytellers and story listeners. My ballet teacher called out to us from behind the stage curtain. Mrs. A said, "Kalip ipitihia" in Greek, which means, "Good luck, kids." I fixed my tall pink princess cone hat, which had a piece of tulle, which is a long piece of fabric that was draping from the very tip of the hat. We watched the curtain open, and I was hand in hand with my best friend, Sarah. It wasn't our first ballet recital, but it was the first time that we were paired together in a dance. We took our places on stage, and I waved out to my family watching from the third row. Sarah and I started dancing the first two parts perfectly. We raised our hands and arms and twirled as if we were ribbons in the wind. Suddenly, my tulle got caught on a sequence of my leotard, and I had to tug at my tulle so that my tulle came off of my outfit. But I tugged too hard, and my hair clip came loose, and my hat fell to the side of my head. I quickly adjusted it back up to my head and jumped right back into the dance. When I looked around, all of my dance mates were already onto the second move. And I felt my friend Sarah's hand grab mine, adjusting me back into the dance so that we could be in sync with everyone else and with the music. My face was heating up and my heart was pounding, but when I looked around, everyone was smiling from ear to ear. I had to force a smile on my face as I wrapped up the dance. I heard loud whistles and cheers from the crowd, and Sarah and I ran back to the back of the stage, and my eyes met Mrs. A's eyes. I watched as she opened her mouth and screamed, "You messed up!" Tears were streaming down my face, and I ran to the third row to meet my family. My mother looked at me concerned, and I said to her, "This is my last day of ballet. I'm not coming back." And she asked, "Are you sure you love ballet?" And I said, "Yes, but I don't love it anymore, and I'm not going back." I was screamed at for something that I did my very best to do that day, but I never wanted anyone else to feel the same way that I did, especially when I was teaching. Decades later, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer, teaching English as a foreign language for university students in China. And before I left, my students gave me this farewell book of letters, and I'm glad to be reading a letter from my student Tom for you all today. Tom says, "Gina, I remember in the first half of the year, I was a little shy, and I wasn't very interested in the system of the class without Chinese. Sometimes I held the thought that maybe I could change my major and it might be better for me. I expressly remember that on a Friday afternoon after your class, you told me, 'Tom, you should raise your hand more often.' And I answered, I couldn't understand. Then you said, 'Never mind, try your best.' Abruptly, in the following time, I could concentrate on your class and try my best to understand what you taught more. I believe it mostly owed to you. Meanwhile, in this semester, I developed an affinity for going to the book club after lunch and learned so much. You invited me to join some activities even though I'm not a member of the book club. Gina, thank you." I was pleased that Tom continued to be an English major even after I left. And a few years after I came back to the United States, after my Peace Corps service, a friend invited me to take a bar class with them. I entered bar into the Google search and saw that it was a high impact, low intensity training, combining Pilates, yoga, as well as ballet. I said, "Sure, I'm happy to join your class." I went up to the bar instructor that day and told her that I'd never taken bar before, but I have taken ballet. And she said, "Don't worry about it. You're going to do great." The bar instructor, Maria, led us through a workout and did all the moves with us. We did our warm-up routine up by the yoga mats and then headed to the bar. And as I grasped the bar, I whispered to myself, "Wow, it's been 20 years since I grasped a bar." My body somehow remembered how to do the toe extensions and leg lifts and squats. At the end of the class, Maria came up to me and said, "Gina, you had such great form. I could tell that you had done Pilates and yoga before, which helped you with the bar class." I continued to do bar for the next 5 years or so, still do to this day. And just a few weeks ago, Maria asked me to join her for a video demonstration she needed to complete the next level of her certification. I arrived that day of the demo recording, surprised to see that I was only one of 2 students in the demo recording. Right before the music began, I adjusted my outfit to make sure I didn't have any wardrobe malfunctions in the next 90 minutes or so. But halfway through the sequence, the band by my ankles came undone, and I had to adjust it. I missed a beat during the music, but jumped right back in. At the end of class, I asked Maria if she wanted to review the video because my band came undone and I missed the beat, but I'd be happy to re-record and stay after class if necessary. And she said, "Don't worry. It's all the band's fault. It wasn't your fault. The viewers of the video will barely notice. I'm so excited to post the video online." She raised her hand up for a high five. We gave each other a big hug before we packed up and headed out to dinner. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Gina, for telling us that story. A couple of things that I'm just kind of marveling at in terms of storytelling that I just wanted to point out. The beautiful use of details throughout the story. whether it's the little hat that's kind of to the side and then it falls off, and then this great callback at the end of like, you're checking your wardrobe however many years later that is, right? So many years later. And just, this event is called Stories That Shaped Us. And to me, it's always incredible. I mean, I've heard more than, I don't know how many thousands of stories at this point in my career, but it's always the same in terms of these stories that we experience from so long ago that follow us, and then they might be dormant for a while, but then they just pop up. And so at that moment in that bar studio, where you're now an accomplished leader and person and you're doing this great thing, and then that pops into our minds as listeners, right? And we start to feel anxious about whether or not, something's going to go wrong. But clearly that's also in your mind, and you didn't have to tell us any of that, right? I'm just interpreting all of that, and I'm with you on that journey. And so, yeah, thank you so much. Just one quick question that I wanted to ask you, and then I want to go to the chat because there were some comments there as well that I think are worth reading. How do you think, I think you've alluded to this in the story itself, but I'd love to kind of hear your words as well in terms of how do you think this has impacted your own leadership? Because there was such a contrast between the ballet teacher who's just screaming at you, and that's their style of leadership. And we've all had those bosses, right? Let's be honest. And maybe one day, maybe one of us was like that. I don't know, but it happens, right? And so, but then the contrast with the bar teacher, who's just kind of the opposite and very supportive, and and sort of calls out, it's not your fault, it's somebody, it's something else, and don't even worry about it. That's all on me. As the leader, I'm going to take this on, right? You don't have to take this on. So I'm just curious how all of that has informed your own leadership.
Thanks so much, Jerome. Because I was taking ballet up until the age of 8 or so, and I made a very quick decision to not pursue ballet anymore. I think for many years, I thought of that incident or experience as a day that I quit something, and I felt some shame and guilt around not pursuing an activity that I love so much. But then I realized, upon further reflection and with the benefit of time, that the narrative wasn't that I quit something that I loved. It was more so that I chose myself in that moment, and I knew who I needed to surround myself with in order to grow, to become the person and the leader that I wanted to be. And it really taught me about surrounding myself with leaders that I admire. It taught me that leadership, your ability to show your leadership style is important at every single moment of the day. If you have a job from 9 to 5, your leadership doesn't end at 5 p.m., but your leadership is exemplified through the way that you carry yourself all the time. And that's something that I certainly embodied too when I'm interacting with everyone. When I was a Peace Corps volunteer too, our role as Peace Corps volunteers was 24/7. And that's how I approach my leadership style as well. I want to make sure that I'm embodying the leadership qualities that I admire about other leaders that are around me as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. There's a question in the chat that I think we should ask. It's from Cecilia. Thanks for such an engaging story, Gina. I was on stage with you. How has your feeling about dancing evolved over time? And do you see it transforming further?
That's an excellent question, Cecilia. Thank you for the question. Cecilia knows me well, and I love her question because I think too that in this moment, I'm reflecting on my comfortability with dancing, and I often don't feel comfortable dancing. And I realize that maybe it was because of that experience with ballet. But over time, I've loosened up and I feel much more comfortable with dancing, and the most enjoyable time that I danced was at my wedding. Even though I didn't have any experience, we formal experience with or comfort with school dances. We hired a dance instructor to teach us our first dance and performed it in front of all our friends and family. So that was a really special moment. And since then, I've also become very comfortable with dancing for that reason. So, yes, I think the story also ties into my experience and comfort with dancing. And I think I'm just so excited by the opportunity to showcase showcase my growth and encourage others to do the same and provide opportunities for everyone to grow in all different facets that they would like to.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Julianne, anything else you want to add? Or?
I do. Yes, thank you for showing us how you address some of your story ghosts in a very positive way and productive way in every part of your life. So I'm sure you're giving everybody something to think about and us to talk about when we finish the podcast.
One last thing. I just want to make sure that everyone notices that in the chat, we have our producer and editor. Her name is Alexandra Boyd, and she just sent a message through to links to Gina's information on LinkedIn and also her book that she co-wrote with Cecilia Loving, Connecting Through Circles. Sorry, Julianne, go ahead.
Next, we're going to hear from Derek McCracken. Derek says he tries to take his work seriously while not taking himself too seriously. His work in the field of narrative health literacy includes initiatives like Narrative Mindworks, Say Ah, and collaborations with Columbia University. Go Lions. Now, these days, he's also embracing the newest and most important role in his life, Papa Mike. He'd like to wish a happy third birthday to his grandson, Sawyer.
Thank you, Julianne. Thank you, Jerome. It's a pleasure to be here with Gina and LaNysha. And I'd like to start with this quote that sticks with me. Get ready for battle. It's tween time. I think about that warning a lot, particularly here in New York City where I live, as I'm traversing across Times Square, and I see three groups of people. Those who adore costume characters, those who ignore costume characters, and those who are costume characters. Now, on my particular journey from grade school through graduate school, I pledged allegiance to each mascot that represented that particular institution. So I was a pioneer, I was a bee, I was a lion, a blue jay, a panther, and even a kangaroo. Now, what I noticed through each of those events and those environments was that as an English major and an avid reader, I was connected to the story, the character, and how those came together. This came in handy when I was a college intern at the Friends of the Zoo in Kansas City. And the Friends of the Zoo was a nonprofit that was raising money to expand and improve a zoo that was built during the Works Project administration era, and it was in pretty sad shape. The walk-through whale was missing an eye, the flamingos were pretty downtrodden, and just overall, it needed some assistance. Now, during the week, I worked in the Friends of the Zoo office, processing memberships and writing stories for the zoo magazines. That really helped me connect to the story and the people that were members of the zoo. But it was on the weekends and during the spring months that I was really making a difference. So there were four of us that were the zoo docents that would stand out in our cleanly pressed khaki shorts, our pastel shirts rather, and our big smiles on our clipboards. And we had the same script. Welcome to the Kansas City Zoo. Have you considered our Friends of the Zoo program? Now, back then, I was not an attentive listener. I was ready to move into my sales pitch. And what I was hoping to do was to convert an attendee into a member of the zoo and to get a $10 commission. Now, keep in mind, back then, minimum wage was $3.35 an hour. So a $10 commission on a membership was the difference between a cassette or an entire box of cassettes. The pitch was pretty compelling. if you join today, your entire family gets into the zoo today, as well as for the whole year, not only here in Kansas City, but at zoos all the way from California to Connecticut. Now, if after that I was getting a sense that they weren't engaging, I would unfold an accordion map showing the zoos. And if that didn't work, I would flip it over and show a photograph of a family of meerkats. That eye contact really worked. What I was doing was selling more than the zoo membership. It was also the story of the zoo of the future. And it was during those months, many long hours in the sun, no hat, no sunglasses. Again, it was all about eye contact, that I was able to engage observation, repetition, and narration. One, when is more persuasive than if. So when you join today creates some momentum, whereas if you join today sounds a little bit more like ultimatum or an invitation to say no. And as I said, eye contact was everything. Rather than look away or look towards something to end the zoo, I would look to the mother or the father or the child and make some sort of human connection. And that really made a difference. And again, the meerkats are popular for a reason. They really did mesmerize. I was also selling the vision, not the revision. I found that people don't want to be stuck in the facts or maybe the fix. They want to see themselves as part of the story that's moving forward into the future. I also learned to listen sufficiently, but not excessively. And what I mean by that is if they happen to stop listening or stop talking, I would build toward a yes and a bridge. So if somebody said, but we only come once a year, I would fast follow with, and by joining today, you're part of our zoo family, not just today, but for the entire year going forward. So I found myself on a roll, but I also felt myself in a little bit of a rut. Again, that repetition started to wear out, and then an opportunity arose. The zoo is recruiting a character, specifically the Easter Bunny, that would help out on Easter morning. The role was pretty specific. I would dress up as the Easter Bunny, I would hide the eggs, and then I would sort of monitor the hunt. And I did that. What I didn't do was ask a lot of upfront questions. So on Easter morning, I found myself donning a costume that was far larger than my 5'7" frame. The mitts were oversized, the feet were oversized, and the head was so large that I had to look out through the mouth of the rabbit. So I was very top heavy. Still, I found it to be a pretty exciting role. So I carefully hid all the eggs. And then once the whistle blew, the rope dropped, and the kids flooded the field, found the eggs, and my job was finished. My job was not finished. A zookeeper who was holding a disgruntled armadillo walked by and said, "Get ready for battle. It's tween time." That's when I realized that there was not an Easter egg hunt. There were multiple Easter egg hunts. And the tweens arrived wearing T-shirts, not church clothes. They were carrying paper bags, baskets, and I think I saw a pith helmet that was turned upside down. There was no way to be camouflaged. I was in plain sight, and they eventually found the eggs, and then they found me. They pulled my tail, they flicked my nose, and they would hiss into my mouth, "You're not real." But I was real. I was a character, the Easter Bunny, and I had a job to do. So I survived that wave, and the next wave, and the next wave. Eventually, my internship wrapped up, and it paid off. I was able to translate that experience into my first job, and it was at Hallmark Cards. My first assignment, Easter. My second assignment was working with our licensing group, which included Disney, Warner Brothers, American Girl, and eventually Harry Potter. So the characters really came to life. I live in New York now, and I was able to bring my daughter not only to the Kansas City Zoo back in the day, but also to Times Square. Someday I'll bring my grandson there. But what I realized as I walked through Times Square and life in general is that there are three kinds of characters: people who adore characters, people who ignore characters, and people who are characters. So you do you, but be sure to pick your battle. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I have a question for you, Derek, because I love backstories as a rule, even before I started doing this work. But I'm sure I'm not the only one in the audience who would love to connect the dots between the eggs and the bunnies to Hallmark to narrative health, because that is a niche topic. So I think we'd all benefit from a little mini summary of that for all of us. So thank you. And I loved your story. I just relate. And as a short person, I so related to the costume not fitting.
Thank you, Julianne. And I'll say up front that I had not heard Gina's story before today, and I haven't heard LaNysha's story yet. And something that connects Gina and I already is that notion of space and movement and awareness. And I think that when I was working at the zoo and hiding eggs, I was very, very focused on what was directly in front of me. But it's when I stepped back and reflected on the larger picture that I really found the power of story. And so when I was selling the vision of the zoo going forward, it was very visual, it was very language oriented, it was very descriptive and emotional. And so I think now when I work in the field of narrative medicine and I'm connecting to a patient, I'm not trying to write their story or even have them rewrite their story in the moment, but just to consider that there's a bigger story.
Thank you. Thank you very,
Love
very
it.
much.
Yeah, and I think Alexandra is going to share very soon some of those links to learn more about Narrative Mindworks, which is a great membership website that I highly encourage people to check out, as well as LinkedIn and the wonderful work that Derek is doing. Before we move on to our final storyteller, I just wanted to reflect on two things that I heard in the story. For everybody else, really, in terms of who's listening here and you're wondering about your own stories and how to tell them, I just thought, very effective to start with that quote, it's tween time or get ready for battle, right? You started the story with that quote. And at that point in time, we don't really know what that's related to yet. And then you reveal to us later and you repeat the quote, get ready for battle, it's tween time, and it all comes together. And it's not like for those 4 or 5 minutes that that we've been held in suspense, we're not all wondering, oh, I wonder when he's going to get back to that quote. No, because we're with you the whole time. And then it's so satisfying. Those 4 or 5 minutes later to hear that quote again and be like, now I get the context. Great, I'm re-engaging with that story. And then the other thing I just want to throw in there is your lessons learned about sales, the when, not if, the meerkats, all those kinds of things. But there's some true nuggets that I think any salesperson will tell you, yeah, that's right. Those are things to focus on. So really, you can do that with a very personal story, inject some of those lessons as well. So I hope everyone is getting a little bit of that from these stories as well, in terms of how you might be able to do this yourselves. Wonderful story. Thank you so much, Derek. We are going to move on to LaNysha. Oh, and also I would be remiss to say that in the chat, Craig said very nicely articulated. I thank you, Craig, for being here. I know Craig, he's been on our podcast. You know him too, Julianne. And he's also a digital health strategist. He's from Wise Working Leadership in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There's a link there in terms of digital health strategy and what Derek does as well. So I love to see those connections happening in the background as well. I knew that even though we can't see our attendees, that's how your listening is coming through. We're just making connections just by seeing your names and what you're writing in the chat. So please keep those comments coming after LaNysha's story as well. We'd love to hear from you. Dr. LaNysha Adams is a TEDx speaker, the 10-time award-winning author of Me Power, and the director of student wellness at Santa Fe Community College. Through her work and her Me Power framework, she helps people reconnect with their own agency. I like the connection between that and Gina's story, actually, and how you were talking about that experience. And that's whether they're navigating career transitions or discovering what's next. All right, so LaNysha, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be with everybody today. I woke up strapped to a bed, my wrists and my ankles, these thick restraints hooked into the sides of the bed, and I pulled, yet the frame shook, but I clearly wasn't going anywhere. And then there were hands at my face, something slid out of my throat, air rushed in, this sharp and cold air where I started coughing. like a full body cough, the kind where your head snaps back and you really can't even recognize your own voice. My glasses, it came out rough, and I just kept saying, my glasses, I need my glasses. Everything was a blur, just light and movement and nothing landing because I'm severely nearsighted without my glasses. A nurse leaned over me. "You're a very strong woman. Calm down," she said. I was like, I can't see. I need my glasses. And remember, I'm restrained. So I was like, I got to get out of here. Finally, this nurse hands me my glasses. I put them on. Now I can actually see the room. Machines, people, lines, tubes, a whiteboard on the wall. I'm reading ketamine, and right under it, fentanyl. So I said out loud, ketamine and fentanyl? Well, damn, that makes sense. Because at that point, I'm thinking, I'm tied to a bed, I can't move, and now I find out I'm on that combination of drugs. So I started piecing things together. People were moving in and out, their machines, voices, routines. And then the doctor told me I had been in a coma for a week. A full 7 days of my life that I had not experienced. And then I learned that my husband saved me. He performed CPR. I just want to pause here for a moment. Now, this is a man who normally takes his time. He's very thoughtful, measured, no sudden moves. But in that moment, there was no hesitation. No, let me circle back. He just acted, and I'm here because of it. So later I asked my husband, how did you decide so fast? And he said, you can't leave me with these kids. We had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So apparently his love for me is strong, but his fear of solo parenting, way stronger. Here's the contrast. The next few days, I couldn't do anything for myself. I was on a bedpan. I was flat on my back, calling for help, pressing the call button in the hospital bed, waiting, trying to shift my body and realizing, really wasn't going anywhere. So for 2 days, I just sat in that hospital bed. And when you've been moving through life the way I had, fast, capable, handling everything, 2 days feels like a long time. On day 3, my first physical therapist walked in. He was Filipino, and I said hi in Tagalog, "Kumusta ka?" He stopped and looked at me, and everything changed in that moment. As we were doing the exercises, stretching my legs, we spent the next hour talking about Filipino food, all the dishes that I love, flavors that we enjoyed, laughing in the middle of a hospital room. At some point, he looked at me and said, don't use this bedpan, and asked them to get you up. You need to walk. He told me that the last person he saw like that during COVID stayed there for a month. They didn't push. I immediately was like, I can't be here for a month. I need to get out. And he said, you can recover faster, but you have to decide. And here's what I remember. Not just what he said, but though in those long, quiet moments in that room, I didn't have anything actually to say to myself. There was no internal speech. No, you got this. Literally nothing. I was just in there with all of this stillness, and I really needed someone else to say it first. So I started asking my nurses, can I get up? Can we try again and again? The small steps, they were unsteady at first, but they were still like little steps. So 1 week after I woke up from the coma, I left the hospital, walking slowly, but still walking, wearing a device every day, a life vest is what it's called, that could shock my heart if it stopped again, until I made a decision 9 months later to get a pacemaker defibrillator. There were 6 doctors, 19 nurses, 10 physical therapists, rotating in and out, adjusting, monitoring, keeping me alive. And they kept my body alive. But there were moments in that room where no one could do the next part for me. And this is an experience that shaped who I am now that I've been to the other side and back. I like it on this side of the dirt. I learned something I now carry into every room. Support can keep you alive, but at some point, you have to decide to get up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, LaNysha. Wow, what a story. I mean, I'm starting to sweat here, right? It's just, wow, so much happened. And it's amazing because here you are, alive, healthy, and there you are in your office. And while you're telling that story, I'm wondering if you're going to be okay. That's how engaging it was, and how you brought us into that hospital room. And the thing that really, and we can see that reflected in the chat as well. People are saying very powerful story, LaNysha. And so I also want to just highlight, to me, what made it so powerful is that, whoops, sorry, that's my timer. What made it so powerful to me is that, a lot of people start their stories by kind of telling you what to expect. And so it's kind of like, this is a story about how I learned to be the leader, or this is a story about how I survived, blah, blah, blah. And that led me to think this. You dropped us right into that hospital room. You're strapped into a bed. And what that does to my brain is that it brings me into that hospital room. So I encourage everyone who's just trying to think of their own story and a message that you want to put out there, don't hesitate to drop your audience right into the action. Because it's so satisfying as a listener to come up, to see how it's going to evolve, and to get that interaction, to understand ourselves 2 minutes into the story or a minute into the story. Oh, that's what's happening. That keeps me engaged, as opposed to you telling me everything that I need to know up front. Then I'm going to stop listening, right? So really wonderful way to tell the story, and the way you paused. Julianne and I, we talk a lot about the power of the pause. You paused in the middle of the story to give us some background about your husband. And that was so great, because then it's like, oh, now we learn about him, and we had a good chuckle about that in the middle of a story that was pretty intense, right? And so again, just getting that relief, you were sort of taking care of us as listeners. So that's what I have to say about your story, and really wonderful. And again, I encourage everybody, if you look in the chat, there are a few things, and there's a freebie for you all that LaNysha is giving everyone, which is a free audiobook for this audience. There's a link there. Look for Alexandra Boyd's chat. Look for her name in the chat, and that's where you'll find those links. All right, I've talked a lot on this one. I had a lot to say. I'm gonna leave the floor to other people. Oh, and I'm looking at the chat as well. What a powerful experience, etc. Oh, there was one question, Derek, for you actually. Craig asked, what were the 3 narrative roles that you alluded to?
Oh, I think it had to do with the ability to be a character, to be in support of a character, to witness it, or to avoid the character. So the choice is theirs. And I think in LaNysha's testimony, it was powerful to witness the story in action. And it gave me gratitude to have not lived through that experience, but to still feel it through her words.
Hope that answers your question. That was a question from Craig. And all right, well, we are going to wrap this up. Julianne, maybe I'll ask you to start us off.
Yes. And before I do my final words, we had wonderful things here. We had Gina, who shows the power of teaching others and those lessons that carry forward and the impact they will make. Derek, you give hope to anybody who's had a job that was interesting, quote unquote. As I've told many students that I've passed in parks and jobs, this will come in handy one day. You will use this for something. And then LaNysha, the wisdom of that person who was supporting you in caregiving, and how he gave you some guidance that made a difference, and what you chose to take on and go forward. And power to your husband for stepping out of his comfort zone and helping you do and be here right now. So thank you to all our storytellers today, Gina, Derek, and LaNysha, for your honesty, courage, and your willingness to share these moments with all of us.
Yes, and I second that, and thanks to everyone who's been listening, because what we've experienced today really only works when people are willing to show up, not just to tell stories, but also to really listen to them.
Yeah, and one more thing before we wrap up, we invite you to take a few seconds to reflect. What's one moment, one idea or feeling from today you'd like to carry with you? And please share that in the chat.
Great. And while you're sharing that in the chat, I just want to take a couple of minutes before we close to share a little bit about what's coming. And I think Alexandra is going to share a link to our events page, so you can make a note of when our next one is going to be. We do these every other month and every third Thursday. And also there's another thing coming to you all, which is that over the past few months, there's been something that's becoming kind of clearer and clearer to me through the podcast, the stories that we hear, the listening that we do, where, we spend a lot of time trying to kind of get better at storytelling, what to say it, how to structure it. But what I've come to believe is that the real shift doesn't start there. It always starts with listening. And you've heard us talk about listening, throughout this event today. And that means listening to ourselves, listening to others, creating the kind of space where something real can actually emerge. So I've been thinking about how to create more of that, not just in one-off sessions like this, but in an ongoing way. So over the next few days, I'm going to be sharing more about something I'm calling the Listening Lab. It's a space for leaders and professionals who want to deepen how they communicate, not just by learning techniques, but by actually practicing this work together. At the core of it is a monthly experience, a small group where we explore a theme around storytelling, listening, and leadership. And then we work with a few people in the group on real challenges, whether that's a presentation or message that you're trying to clarify, or even a conversation that you're navigating in your life or in your career. So it becomes less about theory and more about transformation in real time. So if that resonates with you, if you feel like communication, storytelling, or even just being heard and understood is something you want to grow into, stay tuned. I'll be sharing more very soon, so be on the lookout for a dedicated link to learn more. That's my little pitch for the end here.
All righty. And until then, the invitation is simple. Take one story you heard today and carry it into a conversation this week, because that's how this work grows. Not just here, but out there in the world, one story at a time, to connect and elevate others.
Beautiful, beautiful. And to leave us on this positive note, I just want to read a few of the things I'm reading in the chat about what people are carrying through. It's patience, pace in my storytelling, authenticity, my story matters, everyone has a story to tell, dance even when you're uncomfortable, never be afraid to jump even if you're not dressed as the Easter Bunny, and prioritize bravery. All have me thinking and learning more and more. And the template today was excellent. Thank you, storytellers. Really felt my listening abilities growing. So on that note, I want to thank all of you for listening as our attendees, for registering for this event. Thank you, thank you. Thank you to our wonderful storytellers, and thank you to my wonderful co-host. I hope to see you all next time in May. All right. Goodbye,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Thank you all. Ciao.
Thanks.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.